All right.
I'll let you know when we go live.
Dun dun dun. Do-do-do-do-do.
Oh, I think it's about to happen there, dude.
Are we there? Are we there?
Oh, we're live.
We live.
Wow, what a week.
We're live, and how late are we? We're only 15 minutes
15 minutes late. That's not bad considering
That's not
the
bad.
state of my life at the moment, or the
State of affairs.
Yeah. Um. Yeah,
State of current affairs.
It's been a week. That's the best way to put it. Oh yeah, you know what I was going to talk about. Don't let me forget. Somebody tried calling us on using a fake SM58 for the SM7B versus SM58 video, saying that it was
Which
a
one of us?
knockoff. Me.
Because you.
So-
Okay, I was gonna say I have a box to prove it. So shut
so
up.
somebody said that it tried to say it was a counterfeit SM58. I'm guessing
And what was their like? What was the telltale sign cited?
nothing. I'd never heard anything like that, so I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Walk me through that. How do you think I used a fake one? They didn't actually respond, so
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yeah, that's it.
yeah, it was weird. So we'll
That's
get
weird.
into that. I had a few interesting comments this week. We'll go over. Also, the video coming up on Monday. Should you buy expensive cables? And we'll kind of talk about that as well. I know
Let's do that.
Dylan's got some pretty strong
Got
opinions
some
on
opinions.
that. But I break down. Obviously, there's no sound quality difference between expensive and cheap cables. I make that
Generally not with instrument sources, high-end patch cables. There absolutely
Yes.
can be a sound difference.
Patch
but in
cables
a
are-
context of a line level like source or a microphone source, a lot of the
Yeah.
times no.
No.
The difference is pretty negligible.
But there are differences when you look at the higher end versus the cheaper end. And I mean, why touring bands don't use $10 XLR cables. So I go into that and the build of XLR cables. I was actually fascinated by a lot of it myself. So I figured, why not? You know, it would make a fun video. Plus, I keep seeing people like in voiceover groups. One of the biggest things I see is people asking, well, how much will it impact my sound when I buy a better cable? Like, that's the problem with their audio. It blows my mind every time. So we've got that. Also, Mac M1, you had some thoughts.
Mhm.
All this, I'm waiting to see what Dylan has to say. And you had you had some idea. Oh, the Arturia Mini Lab Mark II. Almost called.
Is it
MK2
Mini Lab
then.
or MIDI Lab?
Mini Lab? Because they have
Mini
a
Lab.
they have a MIDI Lab too. This
I
is
know.
the,
That's why I was
the mini
I didn't know
version
they
of
had
the
a
MIDI
MIDI
Lab. So
the Mini MIDI Lab.
basically, there's that, and then I think there was something else you mentioned, but I'm sure we'll get to it. What do you want to start with today? What's your poison?
Well, let's start with the cables thing. You mentioned that sort of first.
Okay,
So
so
let's hit on that.
Dylan, do you need to spend all your money on cables?
Depends what you're using them for.
Oh, okay, XLR.
Depends what
cables.
you're using them for.
XLR cables.
I shouldn't say depends in that sense. It depends where you're using them. Are you gigging them and beating the hell out of them a lot and dragging them across the floor? I would say there are lots of ways, and obviously there are lots of audiophiles out there that are going to absolutely just stab me in my sleep over this. There are some sonic differences between the cables, but in my experience and a lot of people's experience, when it comes to balanced wiring, particularly in a microphone context, especially in a line level, like plugging a mixer into speakers, for example, a line level context, the sonic difference, in other words, the effect that it has on your frequency response is pretty negligible.
Oh, pretty. Yeah, that's one way to
Pretty
put it.
negligible. The biggest difference that you're going to find with higher quality cables is in the ruggedness of it. So,
Yeah.
I know in your video, I'm sure you're going to touch on it, but the different types of shielding.
Yeah.
There's three big types of shielding. There's stranded, there's the sort of the grid style, and then
Yeah,
there's foil.
braided
And
and-
each
yeah.
has pros and cons. The foil is great. It's got like pretty much 100% coverage, but it's brittle.
Yeah.
If you bend I guarantee a crappy cable like this probably has a foil shield. So if I kink it too much, the foil's gonna break, and therefore you've now just killed the apps like any
Well,
any purpose of having a shield.
RF gets in, yeah, and that's the
Yes.
big thing with it. And the fascinating thing I found, and some of the other things that actually separate cables, like so much so, like with you look at the Mogami stuff, which ridiculous price, but then they make sure
$50 for a 20-footer.
the solder is all heated up to just the right temperature. It's hand soldered. It's all these.
Oh yeah,
things.
it's like a lot of things like that. The quality control,
Is
like you're not going to
massive.
get a borked cable, and
No.
and I think too that the connectors that are used, like generally I would say, unless you're buying Mogami, which in most cases they have their own connectors, but if you're buying other cables, if they say that they use like Neutrik or Nutric connectors,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yep.
That's kind of the standard. And those the connectors are important because they're the thing you're handling and unplugging and plugging in all over the place. So if don't skimp out on the connectors. I would say also just don't skimp out on any part of buying a cable. In my case, I actually just make my own cables. I have a bulk spool of like 300 feet of audio cable, and because a lot of times, especially during COVID, like I'm like, oh, I need to set this up. I can't go to Amazon. I can't wait 2 days to buy a cable. Like I want this exact length right now. So I'll go into the solder room and I'll make it.
Yeah, well, and it's super simple to do. I mean, you get this,
and it's cheap.
Neutrik
And it's cheap. I mean, the 300 feet of like pro audio cable that I have, which is essentially in the same caliber of the cable that Mogami would use, it was like $100
yeah,
for 300 feet.
yeah.
Whereas
The connectors are the big price. That's where
you'll spend like a TRS connector will cost you like $5 for one side. $10 in connectors. I actually got a deal years ago where I bought like a local in Ottawa, a local like audio retailer, and they had these connectors for like $4 each. And I went to them. I said, "Okay, can you?" And this is what I love about sole proprietorships. I went to the manager and said, "Okay, I want to buy 100 of these. What can you do for me?" And he's like, "Well, if you buy them right now, I can knock them down to $250."
Wow.
I'm like, "All right, done."
Yeah, you save a lot of money with that.
I know.
And
whereas if you go to the big box guys, you're never gonna get a deal like that.
Yeah, no. And I mean, the solder temperature doesn't matter, no. But I mean, the quality assurance. Some of them actually offer lifetime. Oh, Camille.
Camille.
Oh, love you, Camille. That's amazing. $5.
What?
That's once again.
Oh, nice. Super chat.
Thank you for the super chat. Once again, not necessary, but never discouraged.
Much appreciated.
Yeah. The beer is running very well this weekend. The little things in the cable that really don't matter, but also kind of matter at the same time. Like you can buy cables that have lifetime guarantees. That they break, you send them back, you get a brand new cable again. I think that might be worth paying $100 for a cable.
It's also worth it. I would say that, even more important than this. I mean, yes, if you can afford it, like they always say when you're designing a recording studio, for example, like when you're commissioned to build a studio, which I have done for a few people, you usually allocate like whatever the budget is for your gear. Like let's say you have a $750,000 budget for the equipment. 20%. So take that, multiply it by 20%. That should be your cable budget.
Wow.
Right. So if you're spending $100,000 in gear, which is not that much for a studio,
sadly, no.
you should be spending 20 grand on cables,
Whew.
which is a lot. But when you factor in again 100 grand of stuff, like how much stuff
also
could you
when
fit in
you
the
look
studio?
at the patch cable bays, like when you got like 40
when you get,
cables coming out of one thing, the money.
Yeah, well, again, I've got these D subs that are behind a bunch of my gear that are this thick. They've got 32 or 24 strands going through each cable, and they're all shielded. It's and then on top of that, you've got those going into TT, like tiny telephone patch bays, like Bantam patch bays, which have like 96 points in a single rack space. So really, and those can cost like one of those patch bays, one of those 96 point patch bays can cost you $1,000, or more.
Yeah.
But again, patch bays, because all of your gear plugs into those, you don't want to skimp out on it. If you are using a patch bay, you don't want to skimp out on a patch bay. But then again, for the kind of stuff that we're all doing here, very few people would ever need a patch bay.
And I'm almost scared of getting to the point because, like, you and I are a lot alike where we just keep building on stuff. It's not like one big buy. you've
No.
slowly built stuff up over time.
Sometimes it is like if I'm building a computer, I don't want to just be like, well,
Yeah.
I'll buy the motherboard here and I'll buy no, it's like some stuff
Yeah.
you gotta buy together.
But for the most part, your studio is basically like a slow build. You know, maybe you start out with a Rode PSA-1, then you move to, you know, the OC White, or it's the same thing like the Mini Lab, the Mark II I've got. I'm gonna upgrade this as I go, and it's always this flow of money. My AudioFuse Studio cost me $1,400. But I had that little PreSonus AR8 that's right up there. That was my last one. By the way, that's going on the Mac. That's going to be my Mac interface because
Is that our segue?
Yeah.
But so before we segue into that, I just one last point on the cables. I think there's certain things that you can be smart about with your cables to get the best sound out of them, the cleanest sound out of them, but also just to expand their don't fold your cable up like this. don't do that. That's not a thing that you do. I mean, especially I would say if you're familiar with the type of shielding that's in the cable, like if you twist off the connector and look at it and say, okay, that's a foil shield, that's a stranded shield. But that's generally a bad idea. Especially with things like power cables that you're probably going to have a fun time trying to find a replacement for. Don't do that.
Yeah,
don't do that. So I would say, get to know I remember when I was in music industry college, one of the first things that we had to do, I think I told you this story, is there were probably 100 XLR cables on the wall on these big, garage hook kind of spools. And you had everything from 50 footers, 20 footers, 10 footers, 5 footers. And the instructor took all of the cables, threw them on the ground in a big spaghetti pile, and we spent 3 hours. We spent 3 hours spooling cables.
Why?
And it was literally the first lab. And I remember everyone was like, "Why the hell are we doing this?" And he said, "Because without these cables, you guys can't do shit." So first thing you're gonna learn to do is treat these with respect, and they will treat you with respect.
There's some trauma based in that. That is a trauma-based response. He's had a few students come through and basically just like, screw it, and do whatever they wanted with the cables.
Now I'm gonna grab what my cables look like now.
I can only imagine.
I spool them up.
Dylan's trauma response with cabling. He's proud of his cables. This should be interesting. By the way, Camille, building stuff, yes. I ordered the TLM 103. That's amazing. And Golden Boys. Hey, Head Shrimp.
See, your cable's looking like that.
Oh.
This is how you wrap a cable.
So you plug them. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's hardcore.
This is the field wrap. This is the field wrap because when you're doing any kind of work in the field, which I've done a little bit of in my time, you do this to protect the connectors from sand and dirt.
Yeah, that makes sense, actually. I never thought of that. I've always just...
Yeah, obviously, you can't do this with... You can, sometimes if there's not enough slack, I'll just do that. There's nothing wrong with just having the ends dangle like that. But I find, too, connecting them stops them from getting tangled. Like, if you've got... I've got 30 of these in a drawer, and I can grab them, and they don't get, attached, which is kind of nice. But anyway, so that's one thing, is take care of them in that respect. The other thing is, and this is a little bit of a lesser-known fact, if you are in a situation with your audio cables where you're going to cross power and audio, always, if you can, either avoid it altogether. Power and audio shouldn't cross if you can. But if you need to cross them, make sure they're crossing perpendicular.
Yeah.
Make sure they're not crossing like diagonal like that. Make sure they're like perfect 90-degree angle, because that minimizes. And one thing that I've actually seen other YouTubers do, where they'll do a test and they'll test out the shielding of an XLR cable, or usually an XLR cable on a microphone, and to test the shielding, they'll subject it to like ridiculous RF radiation. Like they'll put a transformer on top of the cable, like a MacBook transformer on top of the cable, and they're like, and what you find is when you're subjected to ridiculous RF induction like that, none of these cables hold up well.
No.
Like even Mogami cables have a comparable amount of interference. So
yeah, but if the RF is enough to give you cancer, that's probably not the issue you have as cables, right? Like let's be honest. No. And honestly, also with EMI, and that's the one thing I didn't cover in this video, was the EMI, because usually EMI can be handled. It's usually dirty power, and you can get yourself something to clean the power, like a power brick or whatever they call it.
It can be, but I mean, also there's especially some of the modern day, the cheaper intelligent power supplies that a lot of gear have in them, like the non-traditional, like there's power supplies that are transformer based, and then there's power supplies that are like I think they call them buck converters. Someone's going to correct me on that, I'm sure. But the transformer ones are really predictable. They've got that 60 hertz hum. You bring them closer away from something. Computer power supplies, or especially like laptop power supplies, don't operate like that. They have this high pitched squeal that just permeates through everything.
Yeah. Oh, no, I had that too. Yeah.
And I found my old MacBook converter, my old MacBook charger really used to do that. So this is now the segue.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
let's talk about.
Wait. Before we do this, it's very important. Hint Shrimp brought up something that needs to be addressed. He wants to know. Very odd question. You're both nice-looking fellows. Thanks, Hint of Shrimp. I'm guessing that's on your driver's license as well. Hint of Shrimp Smith. Who take care of yourselves. What advice would you give a 27-year-old whose hairline is that of Bill Murray? Okay, so
well, I think we can both speak to that.
I was gonna say you're closer to the Bill Murray than I was.
Yeah,
that's not a bad thing. It's okay. So any words of wisdom, and then I'll finish it off before we go into the Macs.
There's not a whole lot you can do about it. I mean, you can, if you've got like tons of money to throw away, you can get like hair plugs. But like, I mean,
Walmart rug
it's one of those things. I always told myself, and I still tell myself, if it gets to the point where my hairline has reached like halfway down my skull, which is like I still have thick hair at the back, so I'm still quite manageable. But if it gets to the point where it's like I'm just going bald, like it just at that point it's just what no. I don't want to be the guy with like a small ridge of hair at the back of my skull.
No,
and that's
yeah.
No, I don't want to be that guy.
So mine is just shave it. And this doesn't work for everyone because not everyone has this
a face
kind
for
of
a bald head.
Come on, that's beautiful. However, if you need, just go bald. I have found there's a lot of people, women, men, whatever, that like bald heads. So if that's something that you desperately need, like you just need the confidence, once it's shaved, you don't have to worry about it anymore. There's no lack of confidence because shaved head is acceptable. Now, I was watching an episode of Seinfeld where Elaine was dating a guy who had a full head of hair, but he shaved his head, and everyone was wondering why. That's no longer the issue, which is weird when you think back. Shaved heads were not acceptable at one time. So
it's true. They were the hardcore.
I think
they were the mohawk of decades past.
Hint of Shrimp, if you do shave it, kind of get an idea from someone you know whether or not your head is going to be worth it. That said, you can always shave it and just grow it back if you don't like the look of it. The other option is keep it really short. Like keep it really, really short. If you have hair that's only like an inch long, not a lot of people are going to notice that you're going bald. You're just going to have thin hair. So that's the other thing that will work for a lot of people. So try shaving, and if that doesn't work, grow it in short and keep it really, really short. And you shouldn't be too. The worst thing is having somebody with long hair who's going bald because it only accentuates the baldness.
Yeah, having this long.
And it's long in the back, but in the front it's wispy. Ew.
Yeah, it's like.
Now they say shrimp is a family name. The hint is biblical. Hint of Shrimp. I'm gonna be up at night trying to figure that one out. But cool.
Yeah.
Now Mac M1s. This is something that I actually stirred a little bit of controversy here. I actually got to the end of my video with the Mac versus PC, and I had to recommend Mac over PC. I had to do it. And I'm kind of going through a bit of a situation myself because I've got a PC. I love my PC. Not going to get rid of my PC. But you know how much easier life would be if I had a Mac as well?
It's easier now.
Well, yeah, now. Like, what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? It was miserable as hell.
But it will get harder. Just wait.
What do you think?
You just bought it, so it's great now.
Oh, that's the wife's. That one that I did the video with. The wife bought that for her work. I'm getting a Mac Mini, the new M1 Mini. And that's going to be a secondary computer on my studio. And that's what I'm going to be using for when Premiere Pro doesn't want to do something, which I ran into with that Mac versus PC video, where Premiere Pro was actually refusing to export it. It would crash my whole computer when I tried to export it. So being able to like port it over to another one, or maybe run it through, what's the Final Cut Pro? stuff like that. Yeah. So it's just giving myself extra options. What do you think, Dylan? You're going quiet on me. You even muted your mic, didn't you? You did. Can you hear me? There you are.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Clean feed just kind of crapped out.
Oh, that was
I don't know what
clean
happened.
feed. Okay. So,
Yeah, I just noticed like you just cut off, and I was like, what?
So
So what are you saying?
no, just that it gives me new options for my studio. It also like Final Cut Pro is a big one for somebody that uses Premiere a lot. For there's also other programs like Logic Pro X, which I prefer over Pro Tools. Sorry.
Well, you're using a crap version of Pro Tools.
Oh yeah, that Pro Tools first.
I saw yours.
Garbage.
We should briefly mention that Andrew got Aiden got Pro Tools first yesterday, which is the free version of Pro Tools, and I'm like trying to coach him through it over TeamViewer, and like half the stuff that I'm used to as someone that uses Pro Tools for like 10 hours a day and has for the last like 10 years. I'm like, where is this? Where is that? Oh, this menu has nothing in it. What the hell?
Well, it's the free version of anything, Yet, like I also use Studio One. I use that for music actually because Audition doesn't do shit for music. Like it's garbage.
Not easily anyway.
Well, no,
It is doable. I know some guys that have done whole records in Adobe, but I would never try to do it.
Well, I mean, you lose a lot of just even with Studio One, the capabilities. Logic is amazing for doing music, and I know a lot of people that actually use it. Sorry, one other Quebecer says conspiracy microphone. I'm not sure. And Hinter Shrimp, I do have a relevant question. My girlfriend has sensory processing disorder. I'm a metal vocalist, so yeah, it upsets her. Would you recommend soundproofing my room or buying her headphones? Well, I would honestly say I have no idea to what degree the sensory issues might be.
SPD.
I know that my wife is the same way. She gets overwhelmed when there's loud stuff, which causes a lot of problems when I'm listening to my music. I can't listen to my music around her. Soundproofing your room properly is you can spend $100,000 soundproofing your
Easily.
room. So
Yeah, you don't have to, but you can.
Headphones, well, but to get the proper sound rating, if you are a metal vocalist, you need some good soundproofing, especially for those higher frequencies.
Are we talking because you'd want to do soundproofing, but then on top of that, you probably want to also do acoustic treatment. If you're doing soundproofing, you're going to want to rebuild the walls.
Yeah,
which is going to be an expensive. You
double
cannot do
wall.
effective. You can't do a double wall, and then the way we usually do it in a studio, the best STC rating is when you have, drywall, 2x4s.
Yeah.
4-inch gap, other 2x4s, other pieces. So your wall is essentially 12 inches
and
thick.
Also, I've seen guys use the acoustic drywall, and then they'll use this green stuff.
Green glue.
Green glue. Thank you. Green glue, and they'll double up their drywall. So you'll have
green glue. Honestly, I've tried it. It's got a negligible impact.
The point of the green glue, though, if you let it dry a little bit before you attach the two pieces of drywall, you'll keep this little space of air between your drywall that will actually trap more of the sound before.
Yeah, the key is that sound travels through solids really well. It travels through air really well. Where you end up losing a lot of energy is in the barrier between solid and air, solid and gas. So if you can have as many like transitional periods between the two, like if you can have a wall that's like, wall air, like you won't be able to hear anything.
No, but so what we're getting to, Hint of Shrimp, is you might
as a rabbit hole.
just go with headphones. That's probably your best bet.
Cheapest and easiest.
You will end up with a lot less issues, and your girlfriend can maybe put something on that doesn't trigger, which is always a good thing. And Camille wants to know what's the best audio interface for a TLM 103, only for voiceover.
Anything really. TLM 103.
TLM 103 for voiceover depends on what you're doing with your voiceover. If you're doing crystal clear audiobooks, you really don't want to drop below. You can do a Scarlett 2i2 and you'd be fine for that. You're not going to get a lot of noise from that. If you want to go really crystal clear, Babyface RME Babyface Pro.
Yep,
A
our
lot.
army stuff is serious.
Yeah, but
army stuff is very serious.
But if you also just spent, I'm guessing $1,000 on a TLM 103, having $1,000 interface isn't stupid. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, the interface is the most important part of your studio. It's not your microphone. Your interface is what everything comes from.
I would argue they're mutually dependent. I mean, you can have a great, you can have a great, like you can have, I don't know, Aurora Lynx converters being fed by a Neve 1073 transformer 2 amp, which all of that together is like $8,000 in an interface essentially. And then you can plug in an SM58, and guess what? It's still going to sound like an SM58.
It's true. However, your limitations usually start at your interface. When you're talking about, especially with the TLM 103, the weak spot's going to be your interface if you're getting noise.
Yes, if you have a TLM 103, your weak spot is definitely going to be the interface that you've got. So it's getting something substantial, or even I would recommend also the Audient ID. I think it's the ID12 or the ID22, or there's the ID series of Audient interfaces. Are quite cheap, and I've used Audient gear. I have Audient preamps right now, which is what this mic is going into, and they sound great.
And you can actually get some relatively cheap. Like they're not cheap, but they're cheaper than a Babyface Pro. And Camille, they're called RME Babyface Pro, all one word, Babyface Pro. I linked it in my top interfaces for 2019. If you go back, it's actually linked in there. It was the top interface. It's worth about $1,000 US, but they're well known for being really, really nice.
Yeah, RME gear is great.
Yeah. I've never actually plugged one in. I had a buddy who had one, but I've never used it.
I know RME mostly because the RME makes a lot of digital format converters, like SPDIF to AES, AES to MADI, MADI to, Digi. RME's actually kind of set an industry standard in a lot of respects in the digital space. If you invest in RME gear, you're getting what I would consider the cream of the crop. Now you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
But once again, it's also one of those things. If you were to go out, and this is one of the reasons I got the AudioFuse Studio, I don't have to worry about that. I can plug anything into it. I can basically do anything with this interface and be perfectly fine for the level that I want to achieve with my studio. So I never have to replace that unless it dies. So yeah, that's always been my opinion. One other thing Hint of Shrimp wants to know, and this is something that instead of making a video about it, Hint of Shrimp, we're going to just tell you right now. The thoughts on cloud lifters and FET heads.
It's a Band-Aid solution, but it does the job.
So Hint of Shrimp doesn't understand what they are or how they work. And
so
apparently there's a lot of controversy and misinfo on them. So Dylan, they're the same thing. So you can speak of one, like they both do the exact same thing.
They do the same thing. They do it, one does it in a slightly more compressed form factor, but basically they are no different. They're an inline microphone preamp that uses phantom power, so the 48 volts from your interface or from your board, to add a fixed boost to the signal. Basically, that's what they do, and they're known specifically for work with the SM7 and ribbon mics, which is why Cloud originally invented this idea. The FET head is a more recent thing. I think, from what my understanding, the Cloud CL1 cloud lifter is the original, and the reason that they created it was so that the ribbon mics that Cloud makes could work with, your run-of-the-mill preamp that doesn't have 80 dB of gain on it. But they are cleaner. But again, they're cleaner than like if you were to, I don't know, take two mixers and plug them into each other. Yeah. Which is probably what you would need to do to power an SM7.
But they're clean enough you don't have to worry about them adding too much to your signal.
Now, from a philosophical standpoint, the problem with these devices is they add an extra gain stage. And the second that you add an extra gain stage, you're adding more circuitry, more coloration to the noise. Even though cloud lifters and FET heads are known to be pretty transparent, there isn't a preamp in the world that is 100% transparent. No. So the best approach, if you're going to get something like a ribbon mic or, like a Royer or a Coles or an SM7B, is get a good preamp.
Yeah.
What I would recommend is I believe the company AEA makes specifically I think it's called the RPQ. The AEA RPQ, and it is a ribbon preamp with like 85 dB of gain.
Holy crap.
On 2 channels. This thing is designed not only to color the sound, and a lot of people have complimented it on how well it sounds with the SM7, but a lot of people have said that it imparts a really nice color to the sound, a really nice smoothness, and also really clean gain stage.
Yeah.
In the sense that you won't need to ever.
So
use the
yeah,
cloud
hint of
lifter.
shrimp. You don't need one with an SM58. You don't technically need a cloud lifter with any mic. It's the interface that you would need it for if the interface does not have enough drive and clean signal to power the microphone. So you only need a cloud lifter if you they're great for streaming if you don't have post-production, because everything I record with the SM7B I just boost it in post. Yeah, Camille says a Neumann V 402 preamp. If you've got the cash, might as well.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like, no, I know Neumann makes preamps. I've never used them, but like, I know Neumann for microphones, not for preamps. In the same way, I would never buy the Shure MV7 because Shure is known for microphones, not preamps.
Yeah.
So I would go with Neve API. Like, if you absolutely have no money, like before, I would go for a Neumann. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. As far as a preamp goes, I would go
I would try the Neumann out. They've stamped their name on something. I'm guessing it's gone through some QA. Like
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. But if I'm gonna spend, $4 or $5 grand, I don't know how much it is. But like hypothetically, if it's between $3 and $5 grand, there are other preamps that are gonna come first in my brain before I'm gonna be
That's fair.
I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
Even SSL, even though they're not known for preamps, I've used SSL's VHD pre's and I liked them. I've never bought them.
Yeah.
But I've used them and I liked them.
Quebecer, when it comes to Rode PSA1, it's wherever it's available, man. If you've got, they don't have a Long and McQuaid up in that area, but if you've got, Amazon is your best bet. To be perfectly honest, Rode PSA1, buy it from Amazon before anything else. All right, so that's, I think, what we covered, everything there. That's cool.
Back to the Mac.
Into the Mac. So I was using my wife's Mac. We just bought the M1 new Mac. This is their own in-house CPU, SoC. So it's literally an SoC, system on a chip.
System on a chip.
And I actually really loved it. And I did due diligence before I bought this. I wouldn't let her buy it before we actually went on and checked out all the reviews. And if Linus tells me that it's good and this is impressive, I'm going to follow what Linus has to say. He's usually pretty good with this. Quebecer says PC Master Race gamers rise up. Yeah, I get that point too. I game. So when I bought it, the one thing that you and I kind of ran into is certain things don't run on the M1 chip, like Pro Tools. Yet. It's coming. Don't worry. It'll be here in about 6 months.
Well, we'll see. I mean, Avid still hasn't ported Pro Tools for Ryzen, and Ryzen has a much larger consumer base now than.
Yeah.
So from a business standpoint, if they haven't even adopted Ryzen yet, they're not going to be touching the M1 anytime soon.
But is it necessary for them to port it, or would Apple do that? Because
no,
you don't think so?
Apple wouldn't care. I don't think.
Well, it depends, man. That's
my bar for Apple's base is pretty. Mind you, most people that I know that use a Mac, there are some isolated people that use Pro Tools on a Mac. Most people I know on a Mac are either using, usually it's Logic.
Yeah.
I mean, people get a Mac and they use Logic, which is a perfectly good DAW. I have no issues with Logic.
But that's the thing also and this is the one thing I point out in that video is because of their tight circle, if they have a product that does something as well as anything else, they want you on that. So this is why they take their time coming out with something like, the patch for whatever to run on it, or how long is Rosetta actually going to work. They're probably going to pack Rosetta away as soon as the major programs have already caught up. So they want you on Logic because that's money in their pocket. They want all of that. Now, if Avid doesn't care about Macs, there's going to be a lot of studios out with that. Like, there's a lot of studios that run that on Mac.
Yeah,
So
but those at the same time, those studios probably aren't. s- I don't know many big studio operators that rush out to buy the newest greatest thing when it comes out, because that is a horrible business move.
hey,
Because
yeah,
if
it's
something is
money.
unstable, your whole studio is down the tube.
Yeah.
So generally, people are going to wait to see what kinds of issues the M1 has, which it will. I like the question. I guess I have two back end questions. And you may or may not know the answer to this.
All right.
But in your research, so do we know who Apple contracted to create their system on a chip in this case? I know for the iPhone there are various sort of not subsidiaries, but it's a joint effort for the
No,
for
they
the
didn't
A14.
contract
or
anyone,
A-
dude. They actually in-house developed it.
That makes me nervous because Apple's not a CPU maker. I mean,
Well,
I know they've done their own SoCs for mobile devices,
But
which
that's
to me
but
don't.
that's what it is. Your new MacBook is a mobile device now. It's
Yeah,
literally
which
I know, but you also have an 8-core, like it's basically 4 high-powered cores, 4 low-powered cores, and it's a beast. The numbers don't lie on it. That said, I mean, you give this is also the first iteration, so let's see what happens in a year, 2 years when M2 comes out or M1.1 or whatever they call it. It's going to be interesting to see how it moves forward, but this is enough where even Microsoft is looking at it going, "Huh, this works?"
Microsoft need not make their own processor for the love
Surface
of God.
does. Surface, well, no, they're ARM. They're not making their own, but it's ARM processors in the Surface.
No, but at least they're using a company that act like that's their thing. That
Well,
same,
Apple
in the
just
same way that
licensed ARM. They just licensed a portion of ARM, and that's why NVIDIA is being blocked from buying ARM right now. So we're getting into the nitty gritty of the world of computers.
So I'm gonna go on a mini rant about what my personal problem is with Apple. So I'll start out by saying what I like about Apple. I like their software. I have no issues with Apple software. In fact, to me, the only selling point, the only big, like absurdly obvious selling point about an Apple product is the software. I mean, that's what they were started for. Like, that's how people knew them when they started up. And to this day, in my opinion, from what I've seen over the years, having owned a couple Macs myself, that's the most impressive part of the Apple ecosystem. Even with their mobile devices, their iOS software, I really like it. I love the hardware situation and the reliability of an Android, but I don't like the OS as much. And that's the only reason why I am stuck in Apple's mobile device ecosystem. The problem I have with Apple is, in my experience, they don't support the products.
Nope.
And what I mean by that is you can buy an Apple product for, in my case, and obviously this is gonna immediately reveal my bias. So I invested $4,500 in a MacBook in 2012. It broke in 2015, and the company, for no money, I paid for AppleCare, by the way, for no money, would they fix it? It was out of date. They no longer had the capability to repair it, and they had designed the laptop's SMC, system management controller, in a way where a repair center could not fix the problem.
Yep.
Because Apple doesn't like repair centers fixing the problem. And if anyone's curious about some of the calamities,
I knew
they
he
can
was
go.
going to come up. I knew he was going to come
They
up.
can bring. So I saw, what was it? I saw a little expose that, and we're talking about Louis Rosman here.
Yeah, Louis
a
Rosman,
very well known Apple repair tech from, and that's all he does. His whole business, which is like a very successful business, fixes Apple products for people. The products that Apple won't fix themselves,
Yeah.
or the ones that they will charge absurd amounts to fix. And he revealed, what was it I saw a couple months ago? The MacBook Pro A1934, I think it was, which is one of the MacBook Pro models from a couple years ago. He opened it up. It had a cooling fan that wasn't on top of any heat sinks. There was literally one cooling fan in the entire computer, and it was in a random part of the chassis, not even cooling anything.
Yeah, no.
And this particular model constantly had the problem where people's CPUs were literally cooking themselves, and the laptops would just become a vegetable after a certain amount of time. And there was a serious design flaw. And that's a computer that costs many thousands of dollars. So I'm sitting here going, what have they done to the M1?
Well,
I am reluctant.
I went on numbers alone. The wife wanted a new MacBook. She needed that. The Intel the Intel version of it was garbage.
Really? What model did it use? 9th gen or?
Their last one was a 9th gen, and it was overheating. Like it would basically overheat to the point where it would throttle so badly it wasn't even like it wasn't a new. Shop now, Rossmann Group. Yeah.
I have bought some stuff through. I've bought a spare battery for my Apple Watch once on Rossmann Group.
They've done some stupid things, and I no doubt about it. It's because of their ecosystem that they're allowed to get away with some garbage stuff.
Oh yeah, they have there's like a cult loyalty to Apple, which I respect them as a business for being able to cultivate that, because that's quite impressive. But at the same time, if I'm spending $4,000 to $5,000 on it, like at one point, I was actually looking at getting the Mac Pro, like an actual Mac Pro tower, because now you can get those things like a terabyte and a half of RAM. Are you kidding me?
Well,
I'm like, oh my lord!
But they've got the Xeon, the 28 whatever it is, the ridiculous Xeon in it.
you can spend, I forget what it was. I think it was like $80,000. If you
I spec'd one out at 65. Yeah,
65 grand. Well, after tax, it's going to be like.
Oh yeah.
So you spend that much on a computer, and so with the Mac Pro, I feel a little better, because they are upgradable a little bit to an extent. They are, like, you can tweak them. You can add cards and stuff into them. But generally speaking, I don't like that. And there was one issue a couple years ago, and this really scared me, when Apple, particularly with their MacBook Airs, and I think now even with their MacBooks, where they started implementing SSDs, which is fine. Yep. SSDs are great. Love them. But they started using soldered onto the motherboard SSDs.
Yep. Well, that's what the M1 is right now.
And they started removing, so little bit of a history throwback here. Apple, when they initially started doing soldered on SSDs, they would put, I think, what they call the lifeboat connector on the motherboard, which is a way that if your system died, you could still get the data off. In recent years, they started removing the lifeboat connector on their units, which means that if your system dies and for whatever reason nobody can fix it,
it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, unless you can find somebody who really has an adept understanding of schematics and whatnot, which Apple schematics are notoriously hard to get your hands on in some cases.
Yeah. So Louis Rossmann, basically.
Well, even then, like I watched someone ask, when the M1 came out, everyone's like, Louis, review it. And he's like, I don't review, like, I'm not a tech guy. He's like, I'm a repair guy. He said, until these things start breaking and until Apple starts putting out documentation for the things that are breaking, I'm not going to, I have no opinion. Like, as he says, people don't generally break their new shiny toys in the first year. It usually takes a couple of years for, whoops, I spilt a Coke on it.
So here's my opinion on the thing. I have a computer, it's 1st gen Ryzen, which is 3.5 years old. Long in the tooth. I'm going to be replacing it soon. I replace my computer every 3 to 4 years anyways. Yep. So with a Mac Mini, I'm not going full out. I'm just getting the Mac Mini. I'll provide my own screen.
Yep, it's just basically a big Apple TV, right?
And in 3 years, I'm going to replace it anyways. So that's my perspective of it, where it's like, and it's not, I love the PC build. I love all that stuff, but having a Mac that just runs, that I can do music through Logic Pro, which I want to do, and stuff like that, I have to have the Logic Pro. Then I have to have a Mac. If there was a way for me to run Logic Pro X on a PC, I would not even bother with Mac. I wouldn't even touch them. Yeah, I wouldn't even touch
Hackintosh. No, don't. Don't do that. I'm not. I one time, because I was, I think I was 16 and I thought it was really cool, I built a Hackintosh. And it was the biggest pain in the ass of my life.
Yeah. And like you even watch.
And highly unstable. Highly unstable.
You watch, well, they've gotten better because stability, there's more stability and stuff. But I watched Linus Tech Tips, where they've got one of the smartest guys for doing Hackintosh, and he struggles with them. So, and I'm nothing on Anthony. I've got nothing on Anthony when it comes to building computers. So, yeah, I think I'm just gonna avoid Hackintosh.
No, don't do that. Yeah, if you want a Mac, just get it. It's like if you want a Coke, don't get a Diet Coke. Don't get a Coke. Get a Coke. If you want to drink a Coca-Cola, drink a Coke.
We'll see how it goes. I'm gonna actually do once I get the Mac Mini in. I almost pulled the trigger on it. Once I get it in, though, I'm going to kind of do a review of like the whole setup. I'm gonna do my setup, and then I'm gonna do a one-year review.
What's your spec? Like, what's the specs? Like, how much? What's the CPU? What's the RAM situation? What's the storage?
Well, here's RAM. So there, and this is why I didn't get it. So their base model is 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gig hard drive, 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU. So spec'd out nicely on the CPU and the GPU. The 256 gigs of storage,
disk space, that'll barely store your apps.
That's
barely.
Gross. But then it's 8 gigs of RAM. Now the way Mac uses RAM is completely different from the way PC uses it. So you'll have a lot less issue with 8 gigs. You can actually do most of what you want with 8 gigs on a Mac.
Yeah, but I'll give them that. Their allocation of resources is a little bit more efficient.
The problem is if I want to push that, what if 8 gigs isn't enough for me and I don't know until I get it?
I can tell you for music production, 8 gigs, especially when you get into it, is not enough.
Well, and that's the thing. It's not just music production. It's also video.
Yeah, like, video, yes. Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, but I have a YouTube channel. And those videos, man, like I struggle. I've got an 8-core 16-thread CPU. I've got a 1066 gig, which is just starting to show its age now. I've got 32 gigs of RAM, and my computer still tells me to F off once in a while. So I don't know. It might still do it really well with 8 gigs, but I'm guessing I'm going to need the 16. And it's a $250 uptick for another 8 gigs of RAM. It's another $250 uptick for a 512 gig SSD. So I'm like, I'm pulling back. So I'm not buying it yet. I will get it soon, and it's going to happen. But I'm going to do like a review of my setup after that happens, because I'm also expanding into more music stuff as well. So once this is kind of built out to the way I want it, I'm going to do a review of my setup, and then I'm going to 1 year later how it's provided for me. CF Wheezy says, I used to daily drive multiple different race cars. Stupid and young. I now love having cars that just start every morning. Lol. Yeah, no kidding, right? When you compare that to computers, it's true. Sometimes just having a computer that starts every morning is nice.
That's a good segue. Thank you, CF Wheezy, for helping me with that. 3 years. Every 3 years. So back in 2005, I would say that's reasonable, but Moore's Law is kind of dead. The upgrades that are happening to PCs, like that whole, so anyone who's never heard of Moore's Law, it's the idea that computer power doubles, every 10 years?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's stopped. Now we're finding that they're adding new feature sets, but like clock speeds on CPUs haven't really gotten any faster.
No, they can't go past the 5 gigahertz is because of heat, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
It's
basically they're adding more cores and stuff now, but even then that will taper off at a point. And when we start getting into, I think the only time when we'll start seeing Moore's Law come back into action is when we get into molecular computing, which is a very long way away.
But that's part of the problem with computing is once the power limits are what stop computers from moving up. And the last line, the 3000 series of NVIDIA, who are running at 400 watt, like 400 to 500 watt peaks on some of these cards, which are ridiculous. Like 400 to 500 watts
ludicrous.
Used to be a full computer. Now that
or if that, like, laptops sometimes use like 80 watts.
Oh no, they have down to 20 watt laptops, dude.
I know. Again, I'm talking like my MacBook Pro, when it was working, when it was a powerful machine, it was running on a 65 watt power adapter.
Damn. So just based on the amount of people watching alone, we've lost like 7 viewers. I'm guessing people didn't show up for a PC conversation. That's cool.
Probably not.
See if Weezy says my daily PC i9 9900K runs at 4.8 all day. After that, it gets unstable. Yeah, there was the silicon lottery on those chips. If you got a 5 gigahertz, you were lucky. That's why they released the 9900K special edition, the KS, I think it was.
Yes.
That was bin for 5 gigahertz. But 4.8 is still pretty damn sweet when you think about it.
Yeah, I was going to say 4.8, like I'm running, well, compared to this system I'm running now is 2012 computer. It's it's going to be 10 years old in 2 years, and it still handles a lot of the really intense stuff I throw at it. Video production it doesn't handle very well, but when I upgrade the graphics card when they're available, that will change. But this CPU in here, oh my God, don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, no, I remember you were walking me through. Your graphics card is horrendous. I don't think anyone knows about it anymore.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. I'm not.
All right,
yeah.
so let's dip out of the computer since, as I said, people are
dipping out.
Yeah, dipping out. There's a couple things. So one is I did my review on the M Audio pack that you could get, the M Audio Air pack, and it was interesting how this is turning into another one of those videos that is receiving some hate. And when I say hate, I mean like people are disliking it because I disagreed with their purchase, which is never the purpose of what I'm doing. I'm not trying to make you feel bad for ordering something or...
No, this is to deter anyone that might be able to save themselves. And you know what? And I guess, so to finish off the computer conversation quickly, so I don't come off like a massive asshole.
All right.
I don't judge you if you use a Mac or if you've purchased a Mac and that is your workhorse. If it does what you needed to do and you haven't had, like, I fully acknowledge that my experiences with Apple are purely anecdotal. There's no empirical evidence there. It's basically, I've had a shitty experience with Apple, so I'm not buying from Apple. But so I would deter anybody from buying from Apple. But if you're already in the Apple ecosystem and you love Macs and they do what you needed to do, awesome. Don't buy a PC because it'll just be confusing. Like, use a Mac. It does what you needed to do. So anyway, getting back to this. So I've made all kinds of stupid purchase decisions, and I've seen videos absolutely shiting all over my. And you know what? I think, okay, well, lessons learned. I don't think this is so horrible. They're shitting on my purchase.
Yeah, well, and that's the problem. Shashi got a hold of me and said a lot of YouTubers rave and have a lot of good things to say about the M Audio Nova mic. Now, if you recall from my review, I said I actually didn't mind the color of the Nova mic. It didn't sound bad. It just had a high noise floor. And that was part of the problem. So, in fact, there's a comparison where it sounds better than the Rode NT1. Apparently, somebody compared it to the Rode NT1. It sounded better. Please do a fair comparison of the Nova mic and the SM58, which you suggesting, and you can also include other mics to get a proper distinction. If the Nova mic actually does compare to $200 mics, maybe it's at least a pop filter, then I believe you can change your suggestion to recommending this set because it would be a shame to mislead people just for views. But if you're honest and non-biased, you have much respect. Even if your judgment was made in error, it does take an honest person to rectify their mistake after we all learn together. So basically telling me that I was crapping on it because
you wanted views, that's not fair.
That's not fair. To be honest, I paid my own money for that damn thing. Like, I sent it back, yes, but I spent my own money on it. And when I actually showed, like, the biggest thing that I had a problem with, the only thing I really had a big problem with was the shock mount. The shock mount was ridiculously cheap. It was falling apart while I was recording the video. And the idea that I didn't really crap on the mic, I said I like the mic, but the noise floor is a noise floor. I can't do anything about that. And
not really.
It kind of kills the whole, like, well, this is how it sounds compared to an NT1. Except for the noise floor, which is like 2 decibels higher than anything entry-level good. So there's no comparison. And the point that I made was you can go and build your own kit and actually come away from it with a better setup than you would going and buying this pre-made kit. And so, I watched the review, and it's you can see the dislikes on the review starting to mount up of the people that bought it. And I'm sure M Audio is probably one of them. But at the same time...
Aiden was honest. I'm sorry if he hurt your feelings by being honest.
But it's
the
also...
truth doesn't...
It is an opinion.
It is an opinion, absolutely. And that's what I was just about to say, is everyone is entitled to an opinion. Just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it's not a genuine opinion.
And CF Lacey brings up a good point. No good deed goes unpunished. Reviewing everything for us so we have the data before buying. That's the reason I do it. I don't do it because, screw M Audio. I like M audio interfaces. They're great
No,
prices.
I have an M audio MIDI controller, and I love it.
Right?
I've had it for like 10 years, and it's gorgeous.
They make great products. They just didn't make one this time, and that's okay. But if you still decide that, you know what, I'm willing to put up with the noise floor on that microphone, and it was one of those clamp style shock mounts. If you want to put up with that, if you want to go out and spend the extra $12 to get a decent clamp mount for your microphone, cool. The mic didn't sound that bad. But why are you watching this video if you don't like a negative review then?
Yeah, then don't watch a negative review.
I am not like, M Audio, I'm never buying them again. All I said is you can build a better setup for the same amount of money. I think it was $200, and you could get an SM58, an M Audio Duo, the new one they just released, as well as I forget what the other portion of it was. Oh, the headphones. Yeah, you can get the Sony ones. The headphones were ridiculous. But once again, it's just, yeah. And then the other guy, this is the last one, the last comment that threw me for a loop. Somebody said that we used fake SM58 for SM58 versus SM7B, basically making the SM7 or the SM58 sound better than it should have. Which he never responded. I asked him for clarification, just as
there's so much about that I'm like, what?
Yeah, I've never heard that, but cool. Like, I'll entertain the concept.
There are people that make knockoff 58s. It is a thing.
But
however,
they don't sound better than a 58.
No, that wouldn't make sense. That wouldn't make sense unless he was like accusing you. And again, I'm just spitballing here because I can't imagine what else it would be. Unless he's accusing you of like, I don't know, like using the 58 for the video, but then in post, like secretly using like, I don't know, an MKH 416 or something to record to get a better sound.
Time for that crap.
Because there are lots of people that would say that, oh man, you know, the SM7B and the SM58 are night and day different without ever having actually paired them up beside each other.
Right, and that was the whole point of the video is, the SM7B has its merit. You own one. You didn't buy it because you're an idiot. You bought it because of what the SM7B brings to the table. And the SM58 is legendary for itself as well. Like, they're both great purchases for what you're buying them for, but don't kid yourself. You're not walking away with $500 extra in the SM7B. You are buying...
No, supply and demand is why. Yeah. Like, honestly, before the YouTube and podcast community, the SM7B used to be $300.
Yeah.
I remember back in those days. This SM7B was $300. And then the YouTube and again, I mad respect to I'm not shitting on YouTubers and podcasters. But I'm saying that's the supply and demand that caused that to happen.
Yeah, and so $300, that is totally worth it for that mic. Well,
absolutely.
I think $500 is worth it as well.
Yeah, because the price now, like I'm almost thinking about getting another one for other things, to have, you know, one for like to live here, and then another to actually, because I don't feel like unscrewing this every single time to have to do other things. But I think, even the price now, I think is in my opinion worth it.
Oh, absolutely.
But I also think the $4,000 for the U87 AI is also worth it. So
Camille
that with a grain of salt.
Wants to know, UA Apollo Twin any good? Yes, by a long shot. If you're getting the USB version, the USB version is outdated. They do have a new one out, I believe. Just remember, a lot of UA only works with Thunderbolt. So if you don't have a Thunderbolt connection on your computer, it won't work with your computer. You do require Thunderbolt or USB 4, I think.
That said, I mean, you can get a Thunderbolt card.
You can, but then you're spending, like the Apollo Twin that I got, the USB Apollo Twin I got was $1,200 Canadian. Mm-hmm. And if you've got to go out and get a Thunderbolt card and take up one of your 16X slots or 8X slots, I think it is, you're spending a lot of money on something that you could use something else for. So yes, they're amazing. Yes, they're more known for their plugins and their latency-free plugins while they're being used. I think that's the one claim to fame that UA Apollos have.
Okay, I thought you were going to say that's the one claim to fame that UA has. I'm like, oh, trust me, UA's got a lot more claims to fame than that. But I think it's
the Apollo.
Now, their interfaces are quite good. I know a lot of heavyweight, like producers that work in the commercial music, like making music commercially, and a lot of them, as their mobile rigs, have a UA Apollo rack mount, and they the preamps they love them. Mind you, they're all using Macs.
Yeah.
But the now, don't get me wrong, I have a Thunderbolt port on my motherboard on this system, and I would if I ever needed to buy another interface, a UA Apollo rack would definitely be a contender.
Oh, but you're talking
for sure.
money. Like
Absolutely.
I did the comparison between the AudioFuse Studio and the UA Apollo Twin Duo, I think it was, USB, whatever it was. It was the USB version because I don't have Thunderbolt. The AudioFuse Studio destroyed it in every different way, and that's because it's a much newer interface. The Twin Duo was probably 4 years old at the time when I did that. There's no and it's the exact same price. In fact, the Apollo Twin was a little more expensive than the AudioFuse. So I would honestly say if you were going that, I would just go with the AudioFuse. If you don't need the inputs, try to just find the AudioFuse, not the AudioFuse Studio with the 4 XLRs. The AudioFuse has only 2 XLRs, but it has the same pre's.
But the knobs is nice.
The knobs are, but it's not as big. Actually, I think that.
But at least it's got the same knobs. Yeah, knobs are a big deal.
Knobs are important.
I like big knobs.
That's the throwback to
I really
that
like
video.
big knobs.
So yeah, I mean UA Apollo, you're not going to go wrong with it. If you don't need, I can't believe I'm going to say this. If you don't require latency-free plugins.
Well, again, it's not even. I think that's. I find you're putting a lot of emphasis on the fact that plugins are latency free. That is a bonus, but the reason people buy people that buy UA plugins, like my system here has a UAD card in it, which facilitates that same thing that the Apollo Twin does, but on a more powerful scale. Their plugins sound fantastic.
Okay.
They're way
too.
better than Wave's plugins.
As
far as like people, like there are other for example, SSL also makes interfaces with their own hardware accelerated plugins, and they're not as good. They're I would say they're subpar compared to Waves. Or other standards, but the UAD stuff.
I didn't want to sell them short. That's their sales marketing though, is latency free, not
low latency
low latency free. So do what you got to do, Camille. Let us know what you buy. And once again, thanks for joining us on stream. Appreciate the super chat. Feel free. You don't ever always have to do that. We appreciate it though. Other than that, I think we're out of here. I've got, before I go, I don't think a lot of people knew this, but I shared my studio with my son, who was, he's old. He's 19. He's about to turn 20. I'm not that old. I started young, very young. But he just moved out. So my studios, he had a lot of pop around. So now we have fruit flies. He's moved out. So we're now going to be switching his area into part of the studio as well. So this studio is going under a bit of a change, as you can see with all this. This crap on this side. Everything's kind of being moved around. So the next couple weeks, I have a video coming out Monday. It might take me a week to get this into play, but next Friday we will be back for a live stream. I can guarantee you that. And we'll see if I can get something out for the Monday after that. So,
woo.
Other than that, have a great night, guys. Love you. Thanks for joining us. And we'll see you on Monday and then once again next Friday. Cheers, guys.
Ciao.